Is it easier or harder than ever before to close B2B deals?
It is more difficult than ever before to close B2B deals. Without doubt, the most difficult and important part of the sale of the whole sales cycle is opening, because the way that we open determines the probability of ever being able to close.
Is there anything we should be doing to help build that level of interest?
I want to say something pretty controversial, Will. I actually think that closing...
Hi, my name is Will and welcome to today's episode of the Salesman podcast. On today's show, we have Tony Hughes. He is an author, a speaker and a sales trainer. And on today's episode, I'm asking Tony, is closing deals, is finding and closing deals getting harder or easier? And his answer might surprise you. So with that said, let's jump right into it. Tony, welcome to the Salesman podcast.
Thank you so much, Will. It's been quite a while since we had a conversation on your podcast and really excited.
Yep, I'm excited to have you back on, mate. Okay, so purposely open-ended question here, because just for the audience, their perspective, I appreciate your expertise in this space. So super open-ended question, is it easier or harder than ever before to close B2B deals?
It is more difficult than ever before to close B2B deals, especially larger deals. And I want to say something pretty controversial, Will. I actually think that closing is overemphasized. A lot of people believe that closing is the most difficult and important phase of the sale. And for the people that believe that, I actually think you're wrong. Without doubt, the most difficult and important part of the sale of the whole sales cycle is opening, because the way that we open determines the probability of ever being able to close. The way we open really sets the agenda, and selling strategically really means arrive early, engage with senior people, set the agenda around the business case for change. Until we sell the business case, what happens is we can fall into this trap of generating interest without any real intent in behind that interest to invest in change. So strategic sellers really focus on creating the business case or co-creating it so it's believable. They need to be the customer's numbers, and then help the customer drive risk out of what it is they're seeking to achieve by helping them gather consensus with all of those senior stakeholders. So the way we open determines access to others, access to inside information, and I really believe qualify based on engagement rather than just some kind of acronym that you're using in your sales process.
So just to be clear and double down on this, the bottleneck, the difficulty is how we open as opposed to booking that first meeting?
Well, Will, it's both. I mean, it's really difficult to gain access with busy senior decision makers. They're getting bombarded. We're living in the age of automation. There's a lot of hype around AI, but many people are automating in a way that burns through their lists very quickly. They damage their brand. They get their domain blocked. So we need to find a way to gain access. And then once we do, we need to make sure that we've got the right, what I call a conversation narrative, a value narrative. We need to turn up with a point of view for how this senior executive can drive improved results in their role rather than turn up talking about us and our capabilities. I know this sounds controversial, Will, but most sellers are busy creating their own objections. When we talk about us and what we offer, will appeal at best to only 3% of the market. There's 3% of the market at any given point in time in the buying window. The problem with that 3% of the market is it's typically a red ocean shark feeding frenzy of competition where the customer's trying to compare and contrast what we'd offer. If you look at the other side of the coin, there's anywhere from 40 to 70% of the market. The leaders with those ideal customer profile organizations we target are typically under the pump. They're not delivering the results that their boss expects them to, and they've got an awareness of need and awareness to change things. So if we can turn up and talk the language of leaders, which is results, and then under results, we then default to talking about the strategy that drives the result. And only once we've anchored a conversation around improved results and the strategy that drives the result, only once we've done that should we ever start exploring capability gaps that we could fill in terms of product, service, or solution. And very few sellers are doing that today. There's a really interesting piece of research done only about 4 months ago by Gartner They surveyed about 700 sellers, mainly in the USA, but B2B sellers. And what they found was 84% of sellers, account executives, are actually feeling stressed and anxious in their role. They're feeling overwhelmed. So I think that's really interesting. So the world's economy is turning back on. I think things are going to get better. But inside every customer organization, there's a big lens that they're putting over every request for an approval and for investment in anything. And the buyer that we're working with needs to be able to articulate the business case very clearly.
Amazing. I know from our research at salesman.com, and we use this in all our marketing, that almost every single person that joins our training program, that word overwhelm comes up in the application to work with us, in the phone calls that myself and the team do to kind of qualify them and make sure they're a good fit for our program. That is over and over and over again. And sometimes it's overwhelm of, I'm having some success, but I don't really know what I'm doing, or there is not a process in place, or, which we'll get onto in a second perhaps, is the technology side of things of, I've tried this and I'm doing videos, I'm trying to do some automation and I'm using ChatGPT for this and that. And they have essentially shiny object syndrome. So overwhelm is something that I see from our end is almost ubiquitous in the people that we engage with. But something that to get practical for a second here as well, we're doing some, for a company I'm a co-founder in, we're doing some cold AI-based outreach. And it's booking 5-6 meetings a week. Doing great. But something I've noticed from those meetings, having taken a bunch of those calls, is, and you articulated this perfectly, which is why I want to double down on this. People are interested, but they don't necessarily have intent. So we're booking lots of meetings where now we're having to go almost take a few steps back. And before the call, we're building training and webinars and content to try and educate people on, they shouldn't just jump on a call with us because it sounds exciting. We should be jumping on calls with people that we can actually help. And you articulated it interestingly, there's a massive gap between having a conversation with a prospect who's interested versus someone who has intent to solve a problem. So are there any strategies, is there anything that we can implement in those initial calls to somewhat selfishly qualify those individuals? Are there any questions we should be asking? But then perhaps more importantly, is there anything we should be doing to help build that level of interest, either at the top of the sales process or the buyer's journey, to kind of help, give us a better chance of helping our prospects?
Yeah, well, there's such great questions. So there's really two things there that we can talk about. So maybe I can give you a real world example. I work with tech companies. One of the products that tech companies sell is marketing automation. You'd be very familiar with marketing automation platforms. I'm sure that you use them. So let's imagine a seller of marketing automation software phoning the chief marketing officer in the industry vertical of online retail. If they phoned the CMO, chief marketing manager, and said, hey Mary, it's Tony from, we're the market leader in marketing automation software. We have these capabilities. What you do is you just generate an objection because the marketing manager says, oh, we already have software that does that. We're not looking to re-platform any of our software at the moment. I don't have a budget for that. Or they jump into compare and contrast mode. Well, let's compare your widget or tool with the one that we've got. Or they delegate us down to the basement, to some low-level person that maybe evaluates pesky new vendors that want to make a sale. So what I teach is if you were going to contact a chief marketing officer in online retail, you'd build a different conversation. You'd talk about their opportunity to drive improved results. And then if they said, well, hang on, that's a very bold claim. How do you think I'd do that? We then talk about the strategy. So Will, here's how the conversation would go. Hey, Mary, I'm actually a customer. Well, hey, Mary, I was actually on your website buying one of your products. Well, hey, Mary, Joanne Smith suggested I give you a call. The reason is I think there could be a way for you as CMO to drive down the cost of acquisition and at the same time increase repeat purchasing. Do you mind if I ask, how do you benchmark on those two key metrics? How do you benchmark on those with your industry peers? And if Mary says, well, look, hang on, that's secret inside information. I don't know you well enough to share that. Or that's a very bold claim. How do you think I'd do it? Oh, sure, Mary, it's around you being able to more precisely target where there's stronger buying intent and then engage with stronger levels of personalization for engagement. That's how we've seen other retailers alike, and then I'd mention a brand that they would respect but is not a direct competitor. They've been able to drive down cost of acquisition by 23%, and they've been able to increase repeat purchasing by 14%. What strategies have you currently got in play to drive improvements in those metrics? With all of the CMOs that I'm working with, I'm really seeing those two things being top of mind right now. So what I'm doing is I'm building a conversation around the commercial value of considering change, of investing in change. So that's the really important thing. If we've got someone that express a level of interest in what we offer, maybe we're dealing with a marketing qualified lead or a level of inbound, someone that's hit our website, and the buyer is in the mode of asking us lots of questions. They in essence want to treat us as a commodity, right? They want to compare us. There's 3 questions that transform engagement that I love everybody watching and listening this to really think about. So we never want to be difficult or argumentative or uncooperative, right? So if they've sent us their spreadsheet with 1,343 fields to fill out about what does our software do, and I'm talking about software in the context, but say, hey, Mary, absolutely, I'll fill out that spreadsheet for you and we'll organize the demo. I'll provide everything that you need, absolutely committed to working with you in your process. In order for me to do the very best job, with all of these things, do you mind if I ask, and here's the first question, what's happened inside your own organization that's caused you to want to look at this? So I'm trying to get to the trigger event, right? What's caused interest, dissatisfaction, the need to go and have a look at the market, all right? So what was the trigger event? Get to some kind of root cause. Now, if they say something like, oh, well, the contract we've got with the incumbent is due for renewal and my boss has asked me to go and evaluate the market, well, that's a very bad answer for us as a seller, right? Mm-hmm. Right, but we're trying to get to root cause. Here's the follow-up question. Once we're having that conversation, you say, hey, Mary, do you mind if I also ask, if you were to implement something different, compared with what you're doing at the moment, what improved results are you looking for you in your role and I guess more importantly for the organization? What does the sort of business case look like for this? What improved results are you really looking for, trying to drive? So now we're building a conversation around business case. Because if we don't hear really solid answers to those 2 questions, what we have is maybe some interest, but it's not going to go anywhere. And what I work with sellers to do is to qualify based on engagement, whether we use MEDDPICC or BANT or Miller-Hyman, TAS, Blue Sheets, it doesn't matter what we do for qualification acronym, qualify based on engagement. To what degree will the other person share insider information with us and access to other people? Once we're in a good, healthy conversation around those 2 things, what's happened and what improved results are you seeking to drive or achieve? Once we're off to the races with that conversation, we then ask, hey, Mary, where do you see the risks in getting this done successfully? Now, we don't want to ask that question too soon because we don't want to scare them away. Oh, you mean there's a lot of risk in implementing this kind of thing? But once they're committed to the result, and if they go, what do you mean risk? That's a wonderful question because this is our opportunity to start to win the heart and mind of this person by being the one that provides insight and starts to educate. So we could say things like, well, what we commonly find in these projects is there's really 3 key risks. The first risk is that there's a lack of clarity around the improved results that you're trying to drive as an organization and not having a rock solid business case. It's really important to nail that first so that you secure the right level of funding and executive support. The second most common risk that we see with organizations is they fail to gather consensus with all of the senior stakeholders. It's really important that all of those senior key stakeholders are on board and they're clear about what's going to be in it for them and their part of the business. Really important that we run an executive stakeholder workshop for you as part of the process. And what's happening is you're getting yourself on their side of the desk where they think rather than you trying to get around them to sell directly to others, you're working with them to drive risk out of this initiative that they're actually responsible for. Right? So it's for them to create clarity around the result they need to drive, what the business case needs to look like, and how they can gather the right level of executive support and commitment and resources internally. And here's the thing, you opened this whole conversation up around, closing. Is closing getting more difficult? And it is, because every organization has lots of projects competing for funding. It's a lot of noise. So what I teach is you bookend your deal. So you bookend the deal with what I just talked about at the beginning. So what's happened, what improved results, where do you see the risks? And as you're trying to close the deal, the bookend you use there is 3 statements. And the 3 statements that you as the seller need to be able to finish with your boss when you're in your forecast meeting or your weekly sales meeting. And what you say to your boss is exactly what your champion, coach, sponsor, supporter in at the customer side needs to be saying internally up the line as they're seeking approval. And they need to be able to finish these 3 statements in a really sharp, compelling way. This is essential because this pays for itself by we're going with, and then it's your company name, right? We're going with this supplier, their best value and lowest risk because, right? So if they can't finish those 3 statements, our deal is in deep trouble. Because often the person we're working with, when they got the line for approval, even if a project had been stood up internally, even if they'd been allocated a budget, when they go back for sign-off, what they inevitably hear is something like, hey, look, I know I told you to go and have a look at all of this. I accept that we've got a problem in this area, but there are 17 other things that me and the leadership team are being asked to approve. We cannot do them all. So why this particular initiative over the other 17 things? And if our person can't do those 3 statements in a really compelling way, our deal is as good as dead.
I think it's something that is dramatically underestimated in that we all look at our competitors. We're all trying to fight off features and benefits and the desires of our buyer against them, but we don't consider the wallet share that we're going after of all the other opportunities, costs, everything else that goes along with that. You mentioned marketing software. Well, it could be marketing software, it could be CRM, it could be staff hires, whatever it is. So tell me if I'm wrong here, but it seems like we're almost trying to reverse engineer the perfect business case via these questions.
Yes.
And I'm interested in this because we've just added a training, and I might have to redo it after this. After our conversation, Tony, we've just done a training on business cases in our program because it was something that kept getting asked for and asked for, and I thought it was relatively straightforward. So I've done them in medical devices for years and years and years. The NHS has a somewhat strict protocol for building them, for communicating them, and so I use the customer feedback to start to build out that training. Is there 2 questions? Is a business case a physical document that we build with the buyer that gets exchanged, gets literally approved? Is that how we build it? Or is it more of a metaphorical, you said this, we provide that, you promise this, we'll deliver this, and it's an exchange of almost like verbal value?
Again, great question. So it needs to be a customer internal document, not a vendor document from the seller. So, and there's a big difference between, and I'm being facetious, I know, Will, but there's a big difference between the dramatic, exaggerated, mythical ROI claims from us, the seller. There's a big difference between that and an internal business case. So many of the vendors I've worked with over the years, and Will, you've worked with dozens and dozens and dozens of organizations yourself. A lot of companies will have some kind of business case tool or an ROI calculator, some sort of spreadsheet. So there's a few things that are really important. The numbers that go into any tool need to be the customer's numbers and not ours. And they need to be benchmarked against industry peers for that customer. The executives inside the customer organization are very cynical. And they don't tend to think about ROI, right? We as sellers think about ROI, but buyers don't think about that at all. Like everything they can do has ROI. The big thing that people think about in a business case is, what's the commercial impact? How impactful is this going to be? And does that impact monetize? And I'll just give you an example. I've worked with lots of vendors that will put up a business case around productivity improvements. Like this will help people be more productive. It'll give them back time. Well, a lot of the time, those productivity improvements do not monetize. So I remember once I was selling document and records management into federal government in Australia. So we have the Westminster system, the same as you in the UK. Wonderful thing we inherited from the Brits. But I remember being it was a 2-day demo for a massive deal into government. And I remember at the very beginning, I was CEO of the company for Asia Pacific, and I was showing, Gartner reports about, improving knowledge worker productivity and, how much time is wasted by people that can't find information, all these gains. In the morning tea break, a really senior executive pulled me aside, and he was nice, but he was also pointed. And he said, Tony, we don't need you to help us with our business case. We've got a budget, right? And now we're just going to pick who we're going with, who can fit our budget. So I can't go and get more money. And he said, these productivity gains that you talk about, let me tell you something. In our organization here in the government, we're not losing any employees because they're frustrated with work practice. If I give people back their time, what it will result in is them smoking more cigarettes in the laneway beside the building and cruising around in Facebook, during work time. And it was a very pointed example of how the fact that this business case item does not monetize for us as an organization. So leaders are thinking, what's the impact and how quickly does this pay for itself? And I did some work with a telco recently, and what we came up with was brilliant, and it was largely their idea, not mine. But what they decided to do is they always needed the customer always needs a proposal from the vendor, from the seller, from the supplier to walk through with procurement. But that's not the thing that gets it approved internally. It's the thing they need for the procurement process. What they needed internally for approval was a 1-page, a business case on a page. And what they did is we worked together to create a template that's all written in the first person language of the customer. Right, so it states the problem, it states the opportunity for improvements. It then talks about the impact and how those impacts monetize, and then it talks about why we're going with this particular supplier. Right, so sort of internal problem statement. This is the improvements we'll drive. This is the financial impact and how quickly it's going to pay for itself, and we're going with this supplier, their best value and lowest risk because. And what they found is that 1-pager is kind of a business case on a page. That was the thing that could get walked through the customer organization internally for approvals that had the least amount of friction.
There is probably a 4-hour kind of workshop Q&A session on business cases that we can get into, but we can perhaps wrap up with this. How do we write the business case perhaps in the first person? From what context is it written from? Is it written from the executive that's going to sign it off? Is it written from the perspective of the end user who's going to actually get the value from this? Is it the champion who is probably the person literally running around the office with this piece of paper, hopefully wagging it around in the air, getting all the attention? Is it a amalgamation of all this? Is it the company's perspective? Because we can only fit so much on that 1 page. Everyone has different wants, needs, opportunities, risks that they feel they are potentially going to face. What perspective is it written from?
So it even if you, the seller, are largely doing the creation of this 1-page document, it's all as if it was written by the customer. It's like it was written by the customer without any input from us, the seller, right? So we don't want executives within the customer's organization thinking this is the salesperson's or the seller's tactic, to try and get us to approve this. What you're doing is you're helping the executive sponsor or the project lead, that's responsible for something. You're helping them get their own project over the line. So it's in essence written by them, but you go ahead and help them. Because the people buying from us are typically not good at selling internally. They're typically not very good at articulating a business case internally. They tend to be wrapped up in, we need this particular capability in our organization, and I've gone and evaluated the market and I found this supplier that best bridges the gap in the capabilities that we've got. Can you approve it? But a senior executive isn't going to spend money implementing yet another tool or bit of software in an organization, or they're not going to take on the cost and risk of changing suppliers in a particular category unless there's a compelling reason to do so. So just a one-pager, it's as if it was written by the executive sponsor or the project lead inside the customer's organization.
And the benefits that we're going to communicate within the business case, are they, let's say it's a marketing tool, CMO has to sign it off, project lead, few rungs down, is the person who's going to use it within their team to solve a specific problem. Is it written in the context of my team will do X, Y, Z? Or is it the marketing department will achieve 1, 2, 3? Or is it as an organization, we will now do 1, 2, 3, X, Y, Z, A, B, C? Or does it matter? Am I being too kind of in the weeds?
Yeah, well, I know we're coming up on time for this conversation, right? So I'll try and keep this really brief. I believe this particular conversation is being sponsored by Salesforce. I do a lot of work with Salesforce. So let's maybe get real. Let's think about Salesforce Marketing Cloud, right? That's their marketing automation product. If someone internally is trying to justify purchasing Marketing Cloud, a marketing automation tool, and they start talking internally about, we're doing this because it will give us a single view of the customer. This will enable sales and marketing to collaborate more effectively together. This will enable us to execute campaigns with stronger personalization attributes. So I've just talked about 3 things there. And here's the question, Will, it's kind of a rhetorical question. Are any of those 3 things results for the customer? And the answer is no. Not one of those things is a business result. Not one of those things is a business case, right? So the business case needs to talk about this will drive down the cost of acquisition. This will drive up average shopping cart size. This will drive up repeat purchasing. This will help us gain X% market share against competition, right? So those 4 things are results that belong in a business case. And at the very bottom, because what leaders think about is at the top of their hierarchy of communication, at the very top is results. What are the results this will drive? Under the results, tell me about the strategy that drives that result, right? So the strategy in that example I gave you a little while ago in this conversation was the strategy is more precise targeting and with stronger personalization for engagement. Like that's the strategy. Then at the very bottom is capability. And typically what the person's buying, the customer organization is buying, is capability, but we need to link capability to strategy that then drives a result that the customer says is important. And then the leaders go, do you know what? We've got more ferocious competition. We're losing market share. Our cost of acquisition is too high. Average shopping cart sizes are shrinking. Repeat purchasing is falling away. If this reverses those metrics, so this is essential in reversing those metrics, in gaining market share. This will pay for itself in 13 weeks. If you're only going to sign off one thing this month, it needs to be this Salesforce Marketing Cloud initiative, right? And we're going with Salesforce, their best value and lowest risk because, right? So, and then a leader will have the confidence. And the very last thing I'll say is this: in trying to close a deal, the senior leaders are only going to sign off if those things I've just talked about are there. And then there's one other thing they look for. Where's the accountability? Who am I going to hold to account for this actually delivering, right? So we need that one pager with those elements I talked about and someone saying, and I will be responsible. So I'm rolling out a global, we've got a program called Create Pipeline that we run in my own business. We're rolling out a global program for SaaS vendor. The CEO of the business globally is newly appointed and super, super cynical. But the global chief revenue officer met with the CEO and said, you can hold me, meaning him, not me, but you can hold me to account as CSO and my entire leadership team for making sure this is not some one-hit wonder with a piece of training, right? Where you can hold me to account for making sure the improved results are sustained, right? And that gave the CEO confidence to sign off.
Nice. I thought you were going to say, we give the CEO my home address and the names of my children and any issues, they're going to come and hunt me down. I thought that's where you were going to go with that then, Tony.
Yeah, that's true. So, but it's all about impact. How quickly does it pay for itself? And who am I going to hold to account to make sure this happens?
Nice. Well, with that, we'll wrap things up. And with that, tell us more about yourself, where we can find out more about yourself, the books, the training as well, and anything you want to share.
Yeah, thanks, Will. Look, you can see my three books I've published. I'm working on my fourth at the moment. But the best way to find me is at tonyhughes.com.au, tonyhughes.com.au. It's my speaker and author website. Lots of podcast recordings, including past recordings with you, Will. You can obviously connect with me in LinkedIn. And my sales training and enablement business is salesiqglobal.com. And thanks so much, Will, for having me on, mate. Huge fan of the podcast and deeply appreciative of all of what you've done for the sales community over the years.
Cool. I appreciate that. Those are very kind words. We'll link to everything that Tony mentioned for the audience in the show notes of this episode over at salesman.com. And with that, Tony, thanks again for joining us.
Thanks, Will. Thanks, everybody.